He's not bad, you know, since he only saw that 5 minutes ago. Good effort. Well done, Glenn. Congratulations. And I think what's really key about this conference, above others that we may have experienced, is this isn't just talking about theories and aspirations and we are going to. This is about we have done, we have delivered, and we can help you. And it's about that collaboration. It's a word we will hear more and more throughout the day. Glenn, you here all day? Excellent. So you better catch up with Glenn at the coffee break, at lunch, and later on today so that you can find out more about the great work from Vital Energy. Right, next up, we have Andrew Whitworth, Head of Building Energy Services at Veolia UK.
Hi everyone, so as John said, I'm Andrew Whitworth, Head of Building Energy Services for Veolia, and just like to go through the idea of how we unlock net zero and how do we deliver it practically. So first off, before we go into that, is why does Scotland need to act now? With the 2045 net zero target coming, the pressure's on for Scotland to retain its world-leading status when it comes to renewables. There's a lot of funding streams available at the moment, and with the recent announcement of the public sector heat decarbonisation scheme and how we can utilise that. Jobs, 5.6% of jobs advertised in Scotland now are green, and that's only going to grow more and more. However, if we don't act now, the effects can be catastrophic, with around 11% of species could face extinction, and rainfall to potentially increase by up to 42% this morning by 2050. I had a lovely walk in this morning in the sun. I wouldn't want it to be in the rain. And renewable energy provides 113% of Scotland's consumption currently, meaning that it is a revenue generation of being able to export that. And how can that be exploited even more? So why should you particularly care? Public sector bodies need practical, timely, funded solutions with the emphasis on the practical side of it. And I'll go through some examples in a moment. But businesses and investors that step into this need real clarity on projects and the return on those to continue investment and continue driving that. Public sector bodies have a responsibility towards their community wealth. So how can these projects help the community? Where Glenn talked about social value and that side of it, how can we show affordable heating in those areas as well? And how can you continue to play your part in a greener future for Scotland? And taking a holistic approach to decarbonisation that ensures buildings don't get left behind. It's easy at the moment. I think we see quite a sort of a cascade effect of low-hanging fruit, and it's only going to get more and more difficult to continue that journey. So the case study I'd like to go through is Eastbourne Hospital. I know it's not in Scotland, but it's a good case study for what we're going to go through. So it was built in the 1970s. It's a brick and concrete facade building of about 450 beds, and just under 500,000 patients a year are treated. The target for this scheme was 4,000 tonnes a year over a 15-year life to get them to their 2040 date. So 60,000 tonnes of carbon reduced. It had to be built around a low carbon system, and then needed microgrid solutions to get to a point of resilience. So hopefully the video plays. So there was 3 parts to this project. The first is how do we reduce consumption as much as possible? So we built a facade around the building and new double glazed windows, and then we did 2 football pitches worth of roof insulation. Once all 3 of those things were combined, we dramatically reduced the amount of consumption from the hospital. There were projects on the side, LED lighting that was outside of this scheme, but again, trying to bring down the consumption as much as possible. The second stage of the project was to remove all of the steam distribution systems, so to completely bring the whole hospital across to low temperature hot water. And then the final portion is how do we supply the heat to that? So there's a Cascade heat pump system with 6 air source heat pumps feeding 3 water source heat pumps to allow for redundancy within the system and to operate in as high an efficiency band as possible, supplying that 90-degree water. We opted for the 90 degrees so we didn't have to dramatically change the infrastructure of the hospital. So all of the heat emitters, your radiators, we wanted to stick to the right banding, basically to not cause that disruption to the hospital while we're constructing. The final portion for the astute among you and the eagle-eyed is the solar carports. So this is a 1.1 megawatt array that during the summer months completely supplies the hospital and all of its heating requirements. The heat load's still a little bit high in the winter to be able to say it's fully renewable, but we're working on that with the hospital of how we can push that in future. And then from a resilience perspective, there's two avenues to go down. So you could retain the existing steam boilers to low temperature boilers if the heat pumps are ever down. For this project, we chose the route of diesel generators to be converted to HVO later to supply the resilience for the heat pumps. There's enough within the system. And the driving force for that was the area the energy centre is now is going to be rebuilt on for a new part of the hospital for patient care. So the big thing about this project that kind of washed out after it, when we talk about these big energy projects, we focus on the energy. We talk about how we reduce consumption and actually quite often forget about the people that are going to use it day to day and the effects that it has. So there's two lovely stories that came out of this that as an engineer, it never crossed my mind until much later in the process. But staff retention was easier post completion of the project because it felt like a new hospital. It felt like more investment was going into the hospital. There was other projects that were done on the entrance to the hospital. There was it was redecorated, a new coffee shop went in, that kind of thing, but it felt like there was investment in the community. The second portion of that was then there was rooms that weren't being able to be used anymore because water ingress got so bad that they just left them alone. As soon as the facade was done, as soon as the roof insulation was done, the room started to dry out and were able to be used again. And it was used for physiotherapy for the community within those areas. So it was a really nice portion that just realistically didn't cross our mind. It was all about energy savings. So these projects have much wider ramifications than we consider. So the pathway to get there, the trust put together a robust plan of what they wanted, and I've had a few discussions already this morning, and there's so many options available to everyone that I think that the first stage has to be the plan, at least the roadmap of where you want to go. The key second part is finding the right partner. For this project, it was Carbon Energy Fund as a framework provider that did the main procurement side of it. There was a competitive exercise that we were awarded the project, and then we went for funding. Far too often I see it the other way around. We get funding, suddenly panic, need to get someone on board, and it usually doesn't then translate to a successful project. The chance of success is lower than if we go through this kind of approach. The key takeaways was to remain technology agnostic. How can we get to the end goal is the primary thing we're trying to do. How can we look at financing models? So whilst this was funded by the Salix PSDS scheme, it has to grow and more has to happen. It's not fully there yet, and we have to evaluate what financial models are available and how do we ensure operational success. This was purchased under an energy performance contract, and we're bound for 15 years to ensure the performance of the equipment. It's easy to get it installed, but to ensure those high levels, you don't want the white elephant of a project that failed and is just sat there and isn't doing anything. Lessons that we learned through that. The overperformance of the building fabric, it went far beyond what we actually expected, and we probably could have saved a bit of money from the heat pump side of things because the heat consumption of the building is so low now compared to what we thought. But there were so few reference projects for this type of building doing it all together at once. And the program constraints, we put a lot into the impact on patients. So the facade as it went in, the double glazing was put around the outside of the building, and we retained the inner window. So then going back and shutting down a ward only took a day, half a day, just to be able to get the windows out, make good, and then move on to the next one. And taking that approach enabled us to have as little impact on patients as possible. And the final part of that is then how can we now utilise public and private finance together? This was funded purely through a grant. But now we're seeing projects that are either too big for grants or just have bigger ambitions than a grant will allow them to have. So how can we utilise grants as much as possible? How can we utilise the capital estates finance? How can we not just look at replacements? It's almost criminal. You see on some sites just a new gas boiler goes in because that's the easy thing. But then finally, how can we incorporate green finance? So how can we have a true off-balance sheet position for a new project. This is what we do as Veolia. I didn't want to do the big sell, but I've just done the energy. We do FM, we do water recycling, we do on-site services, and we also do commercial waste. The idea of this being any kind of decarbonisation, any kind of additional waste is something that we can pick up on site. And what's interesting now is how these all run into each other. If you've got any kind of water treatment on site, how can we recover heat from that and it suddenly becomes an energy project? How can we utilise waste, whether it's in anaerobic digestion, whether it's in an energy recovery facility? I think I'm having the same problem you had. There we go. So in a very similar vein, actually, policy support and investment frameworks are needed, and that's kind of the ask from government is how can we ensure that policy enables these types of projects to happen? For public sector bodies to engage with the private sector, whether that's through finance, whether that's through technology partners, but to take that partnership approach throughout. And then for us to be able to work within procurement frameworks for the frameworks to not be too restrictive in activities that we can conduct. We see too much real tight geographical locations that really narrows down options for what you're able to do within the public sector. So in a similar way, I'm here all day, so come upstairs, come have a chat if there's anything you'd like to talk about. Thank you very much.